Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Ayaz Afsar. I am from International Islamic University, Islamabad. I'll be teaching you research in linguistics and literature. Our course number is ENG505. There will be about 32 topics, and there would be some quizzes and some questions which you have to perform. Some of the topics we are going to discuss are what is research, what are the components of research, how research is important, and what's its significance in education, how to manage your time effectively, how to find appropriate information, and how to use references to support your argument, to find evidence, how to design a research plan, and how to use material from what other researchers have done. There will be some data collecting methods, and then how to analyze data. These are some of the topics which I have just named. We'll be discussing them in detail later on. Our first topic is the nature of research. So, the objectives of the present research are: what is research? What constitutes a research question? And what research methods and strategies are available? For your convenience, I have put them on the slides. Let me repeat them again. We are going to discuss in this session what is research, what constitutes a research question, what research methods and strategies are available for a researcher. There are two types of researches. Research is something which is common. It is everyday or ordinary research, and you will know within a few minutes that it is not something which people link with what people do in laboratories with the white coats or with the stethoscope, but it is a common phenomena which everybody in real life does. But of course, there is a lot of difference between what people do in everyday life and an academic research. Here, I have presented some features of personal research and a professional research. But before we go into the detail of what are the personal research and professional research is, it's better to define what's the meaning of research is. If you look at the composition of this word, or origin of this word, it has been taken from a French word, or in other words, its origin is in a French word that is rechercher. Look at this. It's a rechercher, which means in French something to find out, something to investigate thoroughly, and to search for information. If you relate it with your everyday life, you will see that most of the things which we do in our everyday life, we use the same procedure. For example, if you want to buy a car, so what do? You search for it, you get information from different sources, which I'll give you examples in a minute. Here I would like to draw your attention towards professional research, which we can say that it is an academic research, and how it is different from personal research, like buying a car. Though there are certain commonalities, professional research is different from personal research, as professional research is more objective, it is carefully conducted, and it uses certain methods which can be repeated. These are certain features of a professional research which make it different from a personal research. If we take, you see, the example of a personal research and say buying a car, so what do you do before you buy a car? I think the fundamental question is that you think which is the best buy for the money you can afford, which is according to your budget, and then you read the motoring journals or magazines or newspapers where you find classified advertisements about the cars, or you go around the car dealers, different shops where the dealers sit, you explore the market, and then you maybe check for some incentives or promotions and match with your needs. One thing is important, whatever you do, that the information about the car won't tell you which car to buy. But this information or this survey will put you in a position to make an informed judgment, to decide by taking into account evidence. That evidence you have gathered, the information you have collected would help you to make a right decision. The personal research have some other examples. It's not just buying a car. You can think other scenarios where you do get information. For example, when you have to decide what to cook as a meal, when you have some guests coming, or you have to, say, watch a movie, you discuss with other colleagues maybe, you discuss with your friends, or you look up into some of the reviews to decide whether you should watch that movie or not. Sometimes when you have to open a bank account, you ask your friends or the people who have a knowledge and information which bank would be suitable for you and what that bank is basically offering. All these examples and many more like this involve a kind of research. But we say this is a personal research. And all this information, a procedure which I have just mentioned to you, it means that before you make a decision, you need what type of information is needed, then how that information can be collected, and what factors are relevant, or how that information can be used. This is the basic objectives or principles of any research, and in this case we have discussed any personal research. In personal research, when we'll compare it with the professional or academic research, you'll see there's a difference. For example, in personal research, you don't need to tell other people. It's up to you. You can keep it secret, keep it to yourself. And it wouldn't matter much to other people if you make a mistake in finding or collecting information. So, it won't matter to other people if we make mistakes in personal research, or if we collect inappropriate or unreliable information, or we make poor judgments on the basis of the evidence, because that would be personal research will be responsible and will suffer at the end. Keeping in view what I have said so far, I would like you to identify 3 decisions you have made in the last 2 weeks which require getting prior information, like buying a car or something else, maybe a washing machine, or opening a bank account. And think about this. And then you write out the research questions you asked yourself, and then in each case list the factors you look into account, the information you thought was necessary, how you went about collecting it, and how you weighed up the evidence in reading the decision. You have 5 minutes to complete this activity. You can discuss this with the person sitting next to you. You can work in pairs, in other words. Okay, that's good. Let's move on to the other type of research, which I mentioned earlier, that is a professional research, and see how professional research is different from personal research. Although professional, and when I say professional, it means academic research, it has much in common with a personal research, but it is carried out in a broader and more public context, and so is expected to conform to standards which are understood and recognized by others in the professional field. So, what's the meaning of it? Professional or academic research is characterized by being systematic and it is rigorous. It is pursued by employing appropriate research methods acknowledged by other people in the profession and discussed in literature or books on that particular field. Professional research must culminate in a report of some kind at the end, and it needs to confirm the accepted standards or established standards in the field. Whereas the personal research was your personal object. If you made a mistake, that was your personal, and you would be sorry for that one, but that would be private, nobody would know. But when you do a professional research, it is more systematic, it is more rigorous, and it is in the public domain where people can question or make fun of if you make any mistake in the collection of data or in the analysis of that one. And it should be within the established traditions set in that particular field. Okay, keeping in view what I have said so far, let's try to define research. You can say research is a systematic inquiry which is reported in a form which allows the research methods and the outcomes to be accessible to others. I say again, research is a systematic inquiry which is reported in a form which allows the research methods and the outcomes to be accessible to other researchers. The most important element in any research is a research question or research questions. Research is all about seeking solutions to problems or giving answers to certain questions. So problem or question constitutes the research topic. So identifying a topic which is worthy of inquiry and then formulating a meaningful research question or questions are the most difficult parts of any research. Any answer or a good answer is only as good as the question is. So if there is something wrong with your question, the answer can't be good. So a poorly constructed or vague question can only result in a poor or useless answer. That's why a lot of time is spent on formulating an appropriate research question. Usually, research questions begin with some of the phrases like, or some of the words like, what is, or to what extent, or does the blah blah blah. But a question or any question is not a research question. We can classify questions into two categories. We can say there are certain meaningful research questions and there are some maybe non-meaningful questions. So what do I mean by that? A meaningful research question is one which is expressed in such a way that it indicates what it is that you will accept as an answer. For example, if we formulate a question, how high is the minarets of Faisal Mosque, Islamabad? So what answer to this question and what method we can use to find answer to this question? Look at this. Is it a meaningful research, meaningful question? And when we say meaningful, it means that the question can be answered and it can be measured. And in this case, height is a measurable variable. Later on I'll explain what's the meaning of variable. But at this stage you can say variable means which varies, which changes. So the question implies that the answer would be a quantification or measure. You can quantify it or you can measure it. So the height of a minaret can be measured in feet or in meters or any unit of measurement. And by that I mean you can determine how many cricket bats are there in the height of a minaret of Faisal Mosque. In that sense it is measurable. So for any research, measurability and a unit with which you measure is most important. And in our case, it's not one way or one definite way to measure it. There are different ways to measure it. And you have to mention what unit you are using. And in this case, we can say that we can measure it either in inches or in feet or in meters, or we can develop any other unit. The purpose is that anybody who uses that measure or uses that unit will come to the same conclusion. Some other meaningful questions or research questions can be, for example, to what extent is the frequency of library visits by the MA English students related to their performance in the examinations? So in this case, you are going to see whether there is any relation between the students who attend the library and their good performance in the examination or not. That can be measured. You can see, look at the students who visited the library, if there is a record, and by looking at the record and then by looking at their performance in the examination, you can see whether there is a correlation between attending the library and getting good marks or not. A number of factors need to be taken into account in a question like this. For example, if you are doing some research on a question like this, would be an answer which would be related to some kind of statistical factor. That would be some kind of numerical analysis. So when you design a question, you need to think about this, that how you are going to present it, whether there would be certain statistics involved in it or not. Another question: what factors led to the separation of East and West Pakistan? If that is the question, how are you going to get information, collect information and answer this question? You have to break down this question into different factors. For example, there were certain social factors, there were some economic factors, there were some geographical factors, or there were some linguistic factors. And then you can further divide into factors which are related to the big umbrella term social. So what could be the social factors? For example, you can say there was a population growth, there was increase in industrialization, there was some urbanization, there was rise in social unrest. In the same way, you can further categorize economic factors such as increase in governmental responsibility, increase in urban poverty, and geographical factors like the distance between the East and the West Pakistan, and to keep a liaison and day-to-day control. There was no direct link between the two parts, and maybe that was one of the other factors, and you can continue like that one. At this point, I would like you to write out three meaningful questions. One, which involves a measure, some kind of unit, to measure that one. Another question in which you have to use some kind of relationship, a correlation between the two factors, and one which involves possible causes of an event, a cause and effect relation between them. So take some time, and I'll see and check your meaningful research questions, whether they are meaningful or not. Again, I would like you to do it in pairs. Okay? All right. Ask two of your fellow students to read the questions you have written, and tell you what kinds of answers they would expect. I'll say again. Ask two of your fellow students, maybe sitting next to you, to read the questions you have written and tell you what kinds of answers they expect for those questions. Okay? Did what they say agree with what you intended? Or it is otherwise? Again, you take 5 minutes to answer these two questions. Okay. Now come towards non-meaningful questions. Non-meaningful research questions, which I have abbreviated here, NMRQs, it stands for non-meaningful research questions. In research terms, those questions which are not answerable as a result of inquiry alone. These include metaphysical questions. It doesn't mean that they are not the right questions. It means that there is no way to measure them or test them. One such question is there life after death? It is a metaphysical question. And the evidence we gather won't be enough to answer this question, especially in the paradigm of a scientific method, which we'll discuss later on, which includes, which considers evidence which is collected only through our 5 senses. Or judgmental questions such as, was DNA a more important discovery than penicillin? There is no way to come to a single or definite answer to this question. So it would be judgmental. So judgmental questions and metaphysical questions are kind of non-meaningful questions. And when I say non-meaningful questions, it doesn't mean that they are wrong. It simply means that we cannot test them, we cannot examine them, we don't have sufficient tools to collect information for them, or we need long time to answer some of them. All this is related with your MA dissertation, and you know that your MA dissertation should be written within a specific time, maybe 6 months or maximum 1 year. There will be certain questions which are too wide. For them, you need maybe a team of researchers to answer those questions. And maybe you need not 1 year, maybe a decade, or maybe more than a decade to answer those questions. All those questions we put in non-meaningful questions. And keep in your mind that when I say non-meaningful questions, it doesn't mean that they are false or they are not true. I simply mean that they cannot be tested. Right? So let's move on to some of the limitations of research. For any research, there are certain limitations. And what are those limitations? Number one, whether it is feasible or not, whether it can be conducted or it cannot be conducted. And I gave you the example why we can't conduct it, because we need more time, we need more resources, we need more people. It cannot be conducted by one person, one single researcher. The second limitation is that whether the research question is, or the research is practicable, is it doable, or it is not. And when you say doable, like the type of evidence we collect, whether to collect that evidence is easy or whether it would be hard. For example, in case of metaphysical questions, it would be very hard to get some evidence which can be measured. Second limitation is that of the thoroughness or the understanding of methods or a method and the reliability of outcomes. By that means that the method should be systematic and it should follow a proper procedure, and the outcomes should be reliable. And when we say reliable, and we'll discuss the term many times in research, it means that your outcomes should be consistent. And consistent means that there should be a relation. There is a relation between the method and reliability. If you use the method and you find some outcomes or conclusions, if some other researcher applies the same method, he or she must find or come to the same conclusions. Then we'll say there is a consistency in the method, and that is most probably the reliable method, and its outcomes can be relied. They are reliable. Keep in your mind that any research is concerned with what is, and sometimes what might be. It cannot determine what ought to be. It is not suggestive. Okay? So either it could be a descriptive, what is, or it is predictive, what might be, but it cannot be judgmental, like what ought to be, what should be. And in any description, in any research, there is a description and explanation. They are part of every research. And the most important thing to keep in your mind that not the expression, research is not the expression of personal beliefs, opinions and views. It is objective, it is dispassionate, and if you have a strong views or opinion about certain phenomena or aspect, it's better you don't do research on it. I know that there cannot be a research which is 100% objective, and there is no element of subjectivity, but the purpose of research is try to be as objective and dispassionate as possible. So that is another characteristic of academic or a professional research. You will see that in some cases people do recommendations. If you read some of the master theses, you will see a portion or a part at the end of dissertation that there is a section recommendations. It is acceptable to put those recommendations for future practice on the basis of evidence presented and conclusion reached. But such recommendations or speculations are in themselves not part of the research. They are usually part of a report which is sent to some higher authorities. What I said, that they may be included in your research, but that is not part of any research. That is not part or component as other elements we have discussed. Now it seems to be appropriate to look at the first requirement for an academic research, and that begins with making a proposal, an outline or a plan. So what should be included in a research proposal? Well, I have taken some of the elements which should be part of any dissertation or a thesis or any research, and they should be in the same order. So the first thing in a research, the report, when it is finished, in a finished product, you will see it has an abstract. So what is an abstract? Abstract is a gist, a summary of what the research is about. And it usually consists of one paragraph which tells you what has been done, how it has been done, what are the findings, and what does the research suggest. It is followed by the section that is called introduction. That is an introduction to the whole thesis or introduction to the whole dissertation. Then comes research question. That is an important element or a component of any research. Usually there is one main research question, and there are 2 or 3 related questions. Then comes, you see, the section which is called a kind of literature review. And literature review is different from literature browsing. By literature browsing, I mean when you are making a plan, you are looking at books, looking at articles, looking at some journals in your field, and you are looking where the information lies and what chapters or paragraphs would be relevant. That is called browsing, what other people have done. When you say that it is a part of a thesis, you make a part of a thesis, that is called literature review. That is a technical term. That how to use the material, what other you have taken from other people's work, what other researchers have done, and you have incorporated their ideas in your own research by critiquing them, by reading them critically and looking at what are the strengths and weaknesses of their work, how the subsequent researchers have refined the ideas, what is the art, state of the art in that field, and what they haven't done or what they have not significantly answered. So you find basically a gap for your own research. That is your literature review. You do literature review to find the gaps in the current knowledge. And that literature review also tells you to establish some of the boundaries you will be working on. Well, for the novice or the first-time researchers, they make a mistake by doing everything. Look, you can't do everything. You can only do a part of it. I'll give you an example. Look, research in one particular field is just like a cake, a big cake. You can't put all the cake in your mouth in one go. What you can take only one piece of it. So that one piece is basically can be compared with your area of research. Well, area is just like, or the field is just like the whole cake. And what you will be doing will be just one piece of the cake. If you try to make 2 or 3, it would be impossible. And in research terms, that would be uncontrollable. So what is required? It is required that you set the boundaries for your research. And by setting the boundaries, it will be easier for you, and it will be easier for your supervisor to work and submit within the time limit. The next component of research proposal is a theoretical perspective. And that theoretical perspective is developed by going through what other people have done. And as I referred before, that is a literature survey. By doing literature survey and looking at what they have published, you basically understand how the research is being conducted in that particular area. In other ways, you can say that you develop your own conceptual framework, or you explain your methodologies and methods. In later lectures, we'll explain what's the difference between methodologies and methods. But for this time, keep in your mind that methodology is a broader term. It is a kind of approach or assumption. And methods are specific ways of collecting data. We'll be discussing some of the methodologies, and within each methodology, different ways of collecting data, which is called methods. The other elements in a research proposal are research design, or you can say some people call it design of study. And when you develop a research design or design of study, you decide on methods and ways of collecting data. You decide on time scale or a timeline. That means how long it will take you to complete each stage in the research. You decide on population or the primary sources. Again, this is a technical term, population. We'll discuss in detail in the coming sessions. By population, you can say it's a total number of objects you will be working on. If you are doing a survey, say you are working on teachers of English language in Pakistan, so their population would be all teachers in Pakistan who teach English language. Later on, we'll also discuss that you don't need to reach everybody in the population. There are ways to get data which is representative of population, and that is called a representative sample of the population. Then you have to decide about primary sources. So what are the primary sources? Primary sources are where you get the data yourself, and the data is usually collected through direct questionnaires, or it is collected through interviews, or observations, or case studies, or in the form of journal writings or diary writings of the authors or the respondents. It is the primary sources. Sometimes the term is used secondary sources. So what do we mean by secondary sources? Secondary sources are that when the data is not collected by the researcher himself, but it was collected for collected by some other researcher, or maybe sometimes government, and the researcher is just using that material or that data for his or her own research. So in that case it would be a secondary source. And that secondary source is also used for say doing, you see, interpretation of text. Say we are doing some research on Shakespeare's plays or Shakespeare's writing. So what Shakespeare has written, okay, is the primary source. What critics have said about Shakespeare or Shakespeare's style of writing is the secondary source. Okay, in your research design, then you have to decide and make a part of your plan data collection and analysis. So there are different ways of data collection. I have mentioned few of them before. One of them is a questionnaire, and there are different types of questionnaire. And questionnaires are used when you need a large amount of people, or you want to know the opinion of the people. So questionnaire could be of different types. There could be a postal questionnaire, or maybe a questionnaire can be sent through the internet or the email, or there could be a questionnaire can be filled with the help of a telephone, okay. A questionnaire could be done face to face. You visit a place, you distribute it yourself. In some cases you can also use other colleagues or friends to collect for you. We'll study this questionnaire in detail and different types of questionnaires later in the session. But here it is just a brief introduction of one way of collecting data. And it is a way where you have to get the opinion of the people, and especially in a large scale. The other way of collecting data could be interviews. There are two types of interviews again. There could be a structured interview, or there can be unstructured interview. Structured interview is a kind of interview where the researcher has already prepared certain questions, and the respondent is asked to just answer those questions, answer those responses in a limited space. Whereas unstructured interview is a kind of in-depth interview where maybe one or two questions are asked and the respondent is left or given a free hand to say whatever they like, and the interviewer will just note down the significant points. Another way of data collection is observation, and again there could be two types of observations. Observation could be participatory, or it can be non-participatory. If the researcher becomes a part of an activity going on, he becomes a part of the group on which he is doing research and also collecting data. So that would be a kind of participatory observation. I'll give you one example. For example, if you want to know how teachers teach or develop learners' language skills. How do they teach? You want to see their teaching methodology. So what do? There are two ways. Either you can go and sit in one corner and just watch what the teacher is doing. Or you can become a student and you do all the activities which other students are doing. Listening to the lecture, doing the work in pairs or in groups, pretending to be just another student. In the first case, where you are sitting in a corner and just watching other people, that is a non-participatory observation. In second scenario, where you are involved with the students, you are doing what they are doing, and the teacher treats you as another student, then you have become the part of the one. And now, this type of observation is participatory observation. Another type of data collection is called journal writing or a diary writing. It's not very common in our context in Pakistan, but in language teaching it is very useful. And you would have come across some of the diaries and even the letters which even literary figures have written, and later on researchers read them, and they found, you see, interesting patterns in those diaries and letters. So diary writing or a journal writing, which is more systematic in the context of language teaching, is another source of collecting data, or another tool of collecting data, where the students are given a diary, okay, or a notebook, and they are asked that by doing some of the activities, whatever they feel, they just jot down in their notebook. And after a certain period of time, a researcher comes, reads their diaries, and tries to find whether there is a pattern in their writing, in their feelings, in their behavior, their attitude towards teaching or not. So diary writing or journal writing, another way of collecting data. So when you are designing a research design or a design of your study, you need to decide what tools or methods you will use to collect data. And it's not only the collection of data. At the same time, you have to decide how will you be analyzing that data. And by here, analyzing means that once you have collected data, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to code it, number it, and try to find some relation, some pattern between them. So you have to make some categories and find some relations. So at the stage of designing, it's not only just a question of data for data's sake. It should be already in plan. How will you analyze it? Okay. The next component in a research proposal is the ethical considerations. And by ethical considerations mean that there should be honesty and truthfulness and genuine approach in doing research. There are certain areas where some of the points should be kept in mind, and the permission should be taken from the authorities that whether the research should be conducted or not. Now, prior permission, that comes under ethical considerations. In language teaching, especially, if you want to observe a class, you need to inform the teacher, okay? And you need to get permission for doing that. Ethical considerations also involve that you need to acknowledge what other people have done and how they have helped you. Well, it is related with another concept we'll be doing in detail, that is called plagiarism. That is also a ethical consideration. Plagiarism comes when you lift the ideas of other people, or you take the phrases or even passages of other people and present them as they are your own. That comes under ethical considerations, and especially plagiarism, and you need to avoid it. There is a proper way how to make the material you lift from other sources or other researchers, and how to make them part of your own research or your own text. But that should be done appropriately, and in this module we'll be spending some time on quoting other people appropriately, acknowledging their work, their ideas, their efforts in an appropriate way that is acknowledged and established in the field. Another part of your research is that there should be an outline plan of the study. And by outline plan of the study means that how long it will take you to complete your study. And it should be further broken down into different stages or components. Say, how long it will take you to collect data, how long it will take you to analyze it, how long it will take you to write the first draft, how long it will take you to edit it and present it. So there should be a detailed plan, and it should be presented, or it should be part of your research proposal. Then comes, you see, the next step that should be part of any research proposal, and that is the justification for the level of the award. And by that I mean level of the award means whether it is MA level dissertation, or it is MPhil level dissertation, or it is PhD thesis. So let me explain here the difference between a thesis and a dissertation. You will come across these terms while you will be reading research methodology, or you will be reading some books on writing dissertations or academic writings. In British English, dissertation is used for a comparatively smaller piece of work. Mostly it is used for MA or MPhil level writing or research, and thesis is used for PhD. But in American context, it is the other way around. Americans call MPhil or MA level as thesis, and they use the term dissertation for PhD level research work. So there should be, your piece should be at the appropriate level. If it is MA level, it should reflect that it is a work that should be presented at MA level. And when we compare these different levels, there are certain considerations. First considerations, its length. Second, its time. So MA level dissertation will be completed maybe in 6 months or less than that, and its length would be about 10,000 to 15,000 words, not more than that. But if you compare it with PhD, where usually it takes 3 or more years, and its length would be about 80,000 to 100,000 words, so a longer piece of writing. And you need not only a long time to plan it, you have to read more, you have to write more, and you have to write at a different level of its complexity. And the last part of any research proposal is called the bibliography. And by bibliography means that you give a list of the appropriate material that would be in the form of books you have consulted or you will be consulting. There would be some of the periodicals or journal articles. There would be any piece of information that would be relevant to you and that would be appropriately written. There would be a complete section, one session on writing appropriate references and preparing bibliography. There are many ways people develop bibliography, and they are presented in different manuals. The two most familiar ones are, one is called APA manual. APA stands for American Psychological Association's manual, and it is usually used in linguistics and other social sciences. Whereas there is another kind of manual that is called MLA, that is Modern Language Notes, a Modern Language Association, MLA. And this is usually used in humanities, especially in literature and other disciplines in humanity. But these are not the only two. There might be others like Chicago, or some universities have developed their own manuals which explain how the text should be formatted, how the headings should be used, how the references should be put in, what type and how much material should be quoted, and if it is quoted, how it should be acknowledged, whether there should be footnotes, or there should be endnotes, or there should be no notes only within the text. So we will be dealing with this topic later on. Well, that is what our research proposal consists of, and what are the important components of a research proposal, and that is the requirement of any good research. So to begin our research, before you actually do research, you have to make a plan. And that plan should be comprehensive. And it will be comprehensive. It has all those components I have just mentioned. And for your ease, I'll refer them here again. So we started with some of the components, and such as abstract, that was followed by introduction, and there was a research question, and then gaps in the current knowledge, then find the boundaries, and theoretical framework or literature review, a conceptual framework, different methods of data collection, then research design, followed by some ethical considerations, and then adding, you see, the outline or the plan of the study, and then justification for writing at a particular level, whether it is MA or it is MPhil, and at the end writing, you see, bibliography or writing the references. So that's it for today. So we started with a general introduction of this module that was the nature of research. We started with some aspects of the research, what is called research. Then we moved on different types of questions, meaningful research questions and non-meaningful research questions, and you did some activities. So that's it for today, and thank you very much.